Hi. I wonder if, like me, you're kind of torn in these weeks and months between being fiercely addicted to following all the news stories in as much different ways as you can to trying to totally avoid them. Maybe, like an awful lot of us, you feel the news is deliberately about certain things. At this current time we're in, it seems like news and all the different news outlets and the ways they get the news to us are obsessed by two different things, one beginning with B and one beginning with C. But in and around that, there are still a group of things that seem to always fascinate news and media. And those things are, it's claimed, sex, politics, royalty and religion. And if possible, all of them mixed up in one. It's easy. It would be easy for me. In fact, I'm tempted always when I'm talking about this to say, well, that's awful. You know, that people are, that the media is obsessed by these things. But of course, the reason the media is obsessed by these kinds of things is because we as humans are obsessed by sex and politics and royalty and religion. And we click on the articles and we scroll through the news feeds and we consume the content. The other thing we tend to say is, don't believe everything you read. Don't believe everything you see. There's a huge amount of fake news out there. An obsession with sex, politics, royalty and religion. Full of inaccuracies. Perfect for this time of year because that reminds me of Christmas songs. Christmas songs, it seems like when you write a Christmas song, you can write anything you like. You don't have to refer at all to the Christmas stories, the stories of Jesus' birth at all, and worry about any kind of facts. But also, you still like to include sex and royalty and politics and religion. Think about Once in Royal David's City. That's about politics. That's about the King David, despite the fact of it being the Roman Empire. The Virgin Mary had a baby. About sex again. On a cold winter's night. Well, hang on a minute. This was in Bethlehem we're talking about. They looked up and saw a star. It's about the shepherds. And in the stories of the shepherds in the scriptures, there's no mention of a star. I saw 3 ships go sailing by. Well, good luck in Bethlehem seeing any body of water, let alone some ships. We 3 kings. There's no mention of 3 in the stories, and there's certainly no mention of any kings. And of course our favourite, the little Lord Jesus, no crying he makes. This story goes to great pains to tell us that Jesus was a human being like you and I, and just like I cry, of course he cried. This story that we come to, the story about someone who unarguably changed history forever, is told to us as, not news as in newspaper news, but good news. The word gospel is attached to the different stories of Jesus, his life and his death and his resurrection. The one we're looking at today is in a book in this collection of books we call the Bible, that we call Luke. And it seems to be written by someone who is talking to witnesses who were still alive and could talk about things that they had seen. Where best estimate, it was written about AD 60, about 30 years after the life and death and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. In Luke's account of Jesus' birth, he talks about some amazing things that we might want to challenge. And yet he also gets to grips with these themes that seem to come round time and time again. Sex and royalty and religion and politics. He starts off by talking about an angel. And again, we get all our ideas about angels from Christmas cards and the fairy on top of the tree and all sorts of art. But the angels mentioned in the Bible, if they're mentioned by name, are all male. And the first thing anyone in the scriptures has to say when they see an angel is, or has to have said to them, is do not be afraid, because angels were apparently pretty scary. So after saying do not be afraid, this angel tells a young teenage bride-to-be Mary that she, despite being a virgin, is going to be pregnant. This is serious news. In this culture, Mary, a teenager, would have been arranged in marriage to an older man, Joseph, And if she is indeed pregnant, not by him, then the real risk is, on the one hand, divorce, which means she has no means of support for the rest of her life and is unlikely, in fact, probably impossible to get another husband, or even death for adultery, which would be what was assumed. And we're told that teenage Mary is indeed troubled by this announcement. But does she run away? Does she come up with excuses? What she does is ask a practical question and then says, let it be. Now we get hung up on some of the elements in here, like the sex element. And some folks, especially commentators or those who like to talk about these kinds of stories or just want to attack the whole thing, have huge questions about how we can have anything to do with a story that talks about a virgin becoming pregnant. Let's step back a little bit and get a bit of perspective. We're talking about a set of stories that claim that this man, Jesus of Nazareth, was the Son of God. And that he claimed that, and that he was killed, and then he was raised from the dead. If we put our faith in a God who can raise someone from the dead, then whether this God can enable a virgin to conceive or not is beside the point. Luke includes this in his story, as does Matthew. They feel that somehow this birth is special, and there are plenty of other folk in history at the time who could have argued with them and written something down, and they haven't. But at the same time, this particular part of the story is never mentioned again. Paul, who writes such a big part of this collection of books, he never mentions the virgin birth. It's not the main point. It's not something to get hung up on. What is being announced in so many different ways is that this is a special birth. This is significant. He's given the name Jesus in our translation. It would have been Yeshua, he would have been called, or Joshua. It means he saves, and a name was significant, and of course this is a signal that there's something bigger going on. That Jesus of Nazareth comes in the line of King David, which is a political statement, a revolutionary statement actually. And in this story, something that turns the whole story upside down, because this is not about replacing one regime with another. This is about setting people free, not from the empire, but in actual fact from the slavery of the whole human race to messing things up, and about putting that to rights. This whole collection of stories is a collection of stories, but yet one big story. A family story, a love story, a promise story about a God who keeps his promises, who says, I will be with you, I will put things to rights, I will come and be there myself. And the empire, the systems in these stories aren't happy with that, and they push back against it. This baby is no fairy story baby. Right from his birth, people were out to kill him. He was a threat to the powers of the day, and that empire, whether it's the Jewish empire with King Herod or whether it's the Roman Empire, wanted to get rid of him, to push back. Mary, though, is asked to play her part, a teenage girl, at a huge risk of the consequences to her of what lies ahead. And she doesn't run away. She doesn't try and escape. She doesn't ask what everybody in her culture should do in this situation. Instead, she asks a practical question, how will this be? And then says, let it be with me as you have said. This is revolutionary. You might wonder to yourself, what does a revolutionary look like? A revolutionary, I believe, looks like a teenage mother, a shepherd, a process engineer, an elder, an HR manager, a mental health counsellor, a locally elected counsellor, a midwife, a teacher, a lecturer, a project manager, a barista, a pilot, a classroom assistant, a carer, a drilling engineer, a police officer, a firefighter, an architect, a grandparent, a nurse, a newspaper reporter, a programmer, a foster carer, a gamer, a dad, a till operator, a social worker, a nanny, a cleaner, a doctor, a physio, a surveyor, a therapist, a vet, a footballer, a vaccine inventor, a delivery driver, a butcher, a joiner, a singer, a dancer, even an imperial stormtrooper, and there are plenty of other roles available. Revolutionaries look like you and me. This story, this God invites us to play our part. Mary knew what to say. What will we say?